They thought it was a harmless little setup, a blind date arranged by friends who meant well. A single black father on one side of the table, a heavy white woman on the other. Two people the world had already made up its mind about before they ever sat down. When she walked into the coffee shop that night, the room rearranged itself in the way rooms do when someone walks in who does not fit the story the room has already decided to tell. No one expected the evening to last past 15 minutes. No one expected him to say what he said, and no one in that room was prepared. For the moment, an old man stood up from his bar stool and walked across the floor toward a stranger's table and changed something in every person watching. But to understand how we got here, we need to go back. Back to a man named James Dillard and a question his daughter asked him on a Tuesday night that he had not yet found a way to answer. The rain over Portland that Saturday evening was the soft kind. The kind that does not fall so much as drift, settling on coat collars and streetlights alike, making everything outside the window look like it was printed on old paper. In a small apartment on the north side of the city, in a neighborhood called Woodlawn, where the houses had good bones and the porches sagged just enough to feel lived in, a man was sitting on the edge of his daughter's bed, trying to brush her hair without catching the knot she always had at the base of her neck. His name was James Dillard. He was 39 years old, a draftsman at a small architecture firm on the east side of the city. His hands were broad and careful, the kind of hands that understood precision in ways that did not always translate into braiding a 9-year-old's hair without being informed loudly that he was doing it wrong. His daughter's name was Nadia. She had her mother's hairline and her mother's habit of asking the questions that were not supposed to be asked at that particular moment. "Daddy, where are you going tonight?" James worked the brush through the knots slowly. 3 years of practice had not made him fast, only careful. To meet someone. A friend of a friend. "Is she nice?" "I don't know yet, baby." Nadia turned just enough to catch her own face in the small mirror on the dresser. She studied it the way children study their own reflections, without performance, without judgment, just looking. Then she said, very quietly, without turning back around, "If she's not very nice, you can just come home early. I'll be up reading." Something moved in his chest that was not quite grief and not quite gratitude, but the specific blend of the two that only parents of a certain age know. He finished the braid, tied it off with a blue elastic band, and pressed his lips to the top of her head a beat longer than the moment required. It had been 2 years and 7 months since Angela died. 2 years and 7 months since he had sat across from a woman at a restaurant and meant it. His colleague Raymond, a man who operated mainly by instinct and the sincere belief that other people's love lives were his business, had cornered James in the parking garage on a Wednesday and told him plainly, "Brother, you don't have to fall in love. You don't even have to enjoy yourself. You just have to sit down and drink something warm with a human being who is not related to you or employed at the same firm." So here he was. Clean shirt. Babysitter confirmed, daughter kissed. Walking out into the soft Portland rain with the particular hollowness of a man stepping back into a country he had left a long time ago and was not certain still remembered him. Across the city, on the west side, in an apartment in the Hillsdale neighborhood, where the living room window looked out over a small park that was empty by October. A woman named Louise Parton was on her third outfit of the evening. She had tried the green dress, which made her arms look wider. She had tried the charcoal tunic, which made her look like she was preparing for a business meeting she did not want to attend. She had tried the burgundy cardigan, which had seemed like a good idea in the store, and now looked like a decision she had made under emotional duress. She was back to the first thing, a soft cream-colored top with long sleeves and a neckline she had tested at least 4 times in the mirror. She stood in front of the mirror and did what she had done in front of mirrors since she was 13 years old. Pulled the fabric down, adjusted her shoulders, angled her chin to find the place where the line of her jaw was its sharpest. Her phone went off on the nightstand. Her best friend Cora, FaceTiming from her kitchen in Beaverton. "You'd better be dressed." "I'm dressed." "Your face says you're about to text and cancel," Louise laughed. It came out thinner than she intended. "Cora, I love you. You know I do. But what if I just..." Cora's face on the small screen went still in the particular way that meant she was choosing her next words with intent. "Louise." I have known you for 8 years. I have watched you find 12 different reasons why 12 different evenings were not worth your time. And I need you to hear me when I tell you that every single one of those reasons had the same name, even if you called it something different each time. Louise did not answer right away. She was looking at her own reflection. The pull, the angle, the chin, the choreography she had performed so many thousands of times that she no longer knew if it was vanity or armor or something older than either. After Cora hung up, Louise sat on the edge of her bed and typed a message. I think I might be coming down with something. Her thumb sat above the send button for almost a full minute. She put the phone in her bag without sending it. She picked up her keys. She went downstairs and out into the rain and did not let herself think too hard about where she was going. 2 people, 2 apartments, 2 mirrors. Neither of them knew the other was standing in front of their own. There is something almost no one talks about, but anyone who has waited in a hallway before a conversation they were afraid of already knows it. Before the moments that actually matter, we do not stand in front of mirrors. We stand in front of every gaze that has ever shaped us. Every classroom, every holiday table, every stranger on a bus who looked a half-second too long. The mirror is just the surface where all of it gathers. And the question underneath all of it, even if no one says it aloud, is older than any of us. Am I still someone worth seeing? The Clover House was a coffee shop and used bookstore tucked into a corner of the Mississippi neighborhood in North Portland. It had low wooden shelves, amber lamplight, mismatched chairs, and a counter staffed by a woman in her late 50s named Ruth, who had been pouring coffee in this particular room for 11 years and had developed a very accurate sense of when a table needed company and when it needed to be left alone. James arrived first. He ordered a black coffee. He paid cash. He sat at a table near the front window and turned his phone face down. He tried to remember how to sit like a man who was not waiting for bad news. The bell above the door rang at 7:04. A woman in a cream-colored top stepped inside, shaking rain from her coat. She looked around the room once, and James watched the room look back at her in that invisible, instantaneous way that rooms have. 2 men at the bar, one in a pressed flannel shirt named Derek and his friend Marcus, had been mid-conversation about something that was no longer interesting. Derek's gaze traveled from Louise to Louise again, and something moved across his face. A small, precise readjustment. The particular expression of a man who has decided something is funny before it has happened. Marcus, beside him, looked down at his drink. 2 women at a couch near the poetry section, mid-20s, looked up. One of them said something the other one heard and responded to with a closed-mouth expression that was not quite a smile and not quite pity, and was worse than either. Ruth, behind the counter, looked up too. Her face did not move the way the others moved. She just watched. The way a person watches who has seen too many small unkindnesses to be surprised by one more and too many small salvations to stop believing the room could still turn. James stood up. He pulled the chair out for Louise. It was not a grand gesture. It was the ordinary small thing a man does when his grandmother made clear, early and firmly, that it was expected of him. But Louise stopped with her hand on the back of the chair and looked at him for just a moment too long. It had been a very long time since anyone had pulled a chair out for her in a room where other people were watching, and had done it without calculation. "Sorry I'm late," she said, sitting. "I'm not actually late. I was on time. I just walked around the block twice convincing myself to be a person tonight." "You made it," James said. "That counts." She tried to smile. It came out crooked. She tried again, slightly better. She started talking the way she always started, at full speed, because momentum was the armor she had used since she was 15, and it was the only one she still trusted. "So Raymond and Cora," she said. "They are absolutely something, aren't they? I love Cora, I do. But she has spent the last 6 months telling me about how well her marriage works, like I'm enrolled in a course. I get it, Cora. The man does the dishes, fully briefed. Anyway, I had 2 glasses of wine before coming here for courage. That's a lie. It was 2.5. She waited for the laugh. The comfortable dispersing laugh that usually came when she said things like that. The kind of laugh that reset the air in a room and let everyone know she had taken care of the awkward part first. James did not laugh. He did not frown. He did not smile. He looked at her the way a person looks when they are listening to something more significant than the words. Louise felt the silence land. "You're allowed to laugh at the wine joke," she said. "It was a perfectly usable joke." "It was," he said. "I just don't think you meant it." The next thing she would remember for a long time because of how quietly it arrived. Derek at the bar said something low to Marcus. Marcus did not laugh, but he smiled in the slow, one-sided way that is worse than a laugh because it has no sound and carries no risk. Louise's ears caught it the way ears do when they have been trained to catch exactly that frequency since middle school. Her face changed. The easy expression she'd arrived with slid off like something that had never quite been fastened. She set her cup down very carefully. Then she looked James directly in the eye, and when she spoke, her voice was different, lower, almost kind. "Listen," she said. "I can read a room. I've been reading rooms like this my entire life. You don't owe me anything. You can stand up right now, text Raymond that I wasn't what you expected, and we can both go home and pretend this was a scheduling conflict. I won't be upset, I promise you. I would honestly prefer it." James looked at her. He looked once toward the window where the rain was making slow lines down the glass. Then he did something she had not prepared for. He moved his chair forward, closer. The small table between them got smaller. He put both hands flat on the wood. When he spoke, it was quiet enough that only she could hear it. "You just handed me a very easy exit," he said. "I'm not going to take it." Louise opened her mouth. She did not have anything to put in it. "I recognize what you just did," he said. "You have probably been doing it for a long time. Handing people the door before they ask for it. Calling it practical. Calling it smart. Telling yourself it hurts less when you're the one who starts the leaving." He paused. "But the exits we clear for other people are usually the doors we end up locking ourselves behind. Next time you feel that reflex, the one that says, 'Let me get out ahead of this,' what if you stayed for just one more moment? Just one. Just to see what exists on the other side of the door that didn't close." Louise sat with her mouth half open, holding the shape of a sentence she could not find. For a moment, the only sound in the coffee shop was the espresso machine behind the counter finishing something. She picked up her cup, set it down again. Pressed one hand briefly against her own sternum like she was checking for something. "I don't know what to do with that," she said finally. "With what?" "With a man not taking the easy way out. That is not in my experience." He let a small, real smile touch the corner of his mouth, the first real one of the evening. "You can just sit here," he said. "That's allowed." She tried. She genuinely tried. But a wall that has been built over 20 years does not come down in 4 minutes because one person refused to walk through the gap she had left in it. If anything, his refusal made the wall taller, because now it had to protect against something it had not been designed for. Kindness she could not account for. Kindness she did not know how to handle, because she had never found a shelf for it. "Are you sure?" she asked. "Because I can read what's happening at that bar. And I would really rather we skip the part where you sit through this whole evening so you can tell Raymond you tried." "I'm not performing," James said. "Everybody says that." He set down his cup. He was quiet for a moment. "I'm just sitting across a table from someone I don't know yet." She looked at him then, really looked. He had a stillness in his shoulders that did not read as confidence exactly. It read more like someone who had already survived the worst version of an evening and had concluded that this one was not it. There was a faint line of something, possibly chalk dust, still on the edge of his left cuff. His eyes were steady in the way eyes are steady when the person behind them has decided not to be rattled tonight. He was not what she had pictured. She was not certain what she had pictured. Probably someone who would already be looking for his coat. There is a thing almost no one says aloud, but most people know the way they know their own heartbeat. The most hurt among us are not the ones who stopped believing in love. They are the ones who stopped believing they were worth it. Louise had not built that wall to keep James out. She had built it so that when he eventually left, as she was certain he would, she could tell herself she'd already known. Knowing in advance had become her shield. The problem with that kind of shield is that it does not prevent the blow. It only teaches you to expect it. And after long enough, you can no longer tell the difference between anticipating pain and inviting it. He asked her what she did for work, and she heard herself reach for the script. "I run a podcast." Literary, if that doesn't sound insufferable. We interview authors, mostly novelists, occasionally poets. I handle the bookings, the research, the editing. I don't host. I'm the one behind the board. You love it. Very much. Why don't you host? She gave him the answer she had used at countless dinners, the one she had polished into something smooth and self-aware enough to stop further questions. I like being behind the microphone. Voices don't have a body. People hear differently when they can't see you. The line had always worked. People nodded, moved on, gave her the cover she was offering them. James did not move on. Do you actually believe that? He asked. That voices don't have a body? It's a metaphor. It's a place to hide. She laughed, but it came out brittle. Okay, that's direct, he said gently. I've been listening to you for 20 minutes. I've watched you turn away from 3 things you actually wanted to say. You made the wine joke instead of saying you were frightened. You talked about Cora instead of saying you almost didn't come. And just now you told me you love your job by explaining why you make yourself invisible in it. He held her gaze. I'm not trying to back you into anything. I'm just paying attention. Her face went warm. She wanted to be angry. Anger was efficient, clean, reliable. But what came up instead of anger was something closer to the feeling you get when you've been holding something heavy for a very long time, and someone finally asks if they can take it for a minute. That's a parlor trick, she said. It isn't. How would you know what to look for? He looked down at his hands. Because I lived with someone for 11 years who did the same thing, he said. Different version. Same instinct. She did not know yet that he meant his wife. She would in a few moments. Why did you say yes to this tonight? She asked. She had been sitting with that question since she arrived. He took a long time before he answered. She did not fill the silence. Something in his eyes told her he was looking at something she could not see from where she was sitting. My wife's name was Angela, he said. He said it carefully. The way a man says a name he has not let himself say to a stranger in a long time. She died 2 years ago, ovarian cancer. We had 3 years of it from the first diagnosis, surgery, treatment, remission, recurrence, the whole long map. His voice did not break, it only slowed, the way roads slow before a curve. There was a period during the second round of treatment when she gained a significant amount of weight. The medications did it. Her body was holding everything it had. And then in the last few months it reversed. She's lost more than weight. By the end, she would look at photographs from a year before and not recognize the woman in them. Louise was completely still. There was a night, maybe 14 months before she died, he said. She came out of the bathroom and she stood in the doorway to our bedroom for a long moment. She wasn't crying loudly. She was crying the way you cry when you've been holding it for so long you forgot you still were. She said, I don't know who that person is anymore. I look in the mirror and I don't know. He swallowed once. I sat down on the floor next to her, right there on the cold floor. And I told her the only true thing I had. I told her, I know who you are, I know you, that's my job. The coffee shop had not gone quiet. But Louise's hearing had narrowed down to his voice, and the low, soft sound of rain on the window, and almost nothing else. She did not know what to do with what he had just given her. She had come in here prepared to be judged. She had not come prepared to be trusted. We grow up believing love is the large gesture, the declared, witnessed, photographed thing. But there is a quieter version almost no one teaches us about. The version where someone refuses to lose track of who you are, even on the nights you have entirely lost track of yourself. I know you. That's my job. That is a vow most people never receive. Maybe not from anyone, and the weight of that absence is real. But here is what took the longest to understand. We can learn to become the person who says it to someone else, and on the hardest nights, we can learn slowly to say it to ourselves. Louise did not say any of this. She said something smaller, because small was what she had. That's a beautiful thing to have told her. It was true, he said. That's all. For the next 20 minutes, something shifted between them that neither of them named. They talked about books. He had read more Baldwin than she expected. She had strong opinions about Marilynne Robinson that she usually kept to herself, but she did not keep them to herself now, and he listened without interrupting. She found out he was a draftsman, that he designed structural elements for residential architecture, and that on weekends he built furniture in his garage, mostly things his daughter had requested with the specificity of a small, demanding client. He found out she had been a competitive rower in college. He raised his eyebrows at that, and she heard herself say, with almost no performance in it, "I was good. I was genuinely good." She told him about Nadia without him having to ask. He told her his daughter was learning to play guitar badly and was extremely committed to her badness. He played her a short video on his phone of a small girl in a yellow sweater, eyes closed in concentration, entirely devoted to a chord progression that did not quite exist in any known musical tradition. Louise laughed. Head tilted back, the sound real, unguarded, the laugh she used when no one was looking and she forgot to manage it. James watched her face. He didn't say anything about it. But she saw him notice. Ruth, the woman behind the counter, came over with a fresh pot of coffee. She had not needed to. The cups were still half full. She poured slowly. She set the pot down. She did not smile at them exactly. She did something better. She let them be. Then she walked back behind the counter and picked up her folded towel and went back to wiping down the espresso machine with the specific focus of someone who is pretending not to have seen anything. Maybe you have known a Ruth. The kind of person who never says anything particularly important, but is always somehow present for the moments that turn out to matter. They don't intervene. They don't fix anything. They simply stay close enough that you know you are not alone in the room. It is easy to underestimate that kind of presence because it doesn't announce itself. But I'll tell you something. Being a Ruth for someone, just staying, just refusing to look away, is one of the quiet and serious things one person can do for another. Most of the saving that happens in ordinary rooms does not come from speeches. It comes from people who simply do not leave. Things might have ended well right there. 2 cups of coffee, a fresh pour, the rain easing, the night already stretched further than either of them had planned. But walls built over 20 years do not come down in 20 minutes. And Derek at the bar, who had been watching this table intermittently all evening with an expression he would not have been able to defend if pressed, chose that particular moment to make a mistake. He and Marcus stood up to leave. On their way to the door, Derek slowed near James and Louise's table. He did not quite stop. He did not say anything. He looked at the two of them and made a sound, just a sound, the length of a single exhale. Something between a laugh and a breath that was not a laugh. It was the kind of sound that people make when they have decided they are above the moment they are witnessing. Marcus, beside him, did not make the sound. He kept walking and looked at the floor, but Louise heard it. Her ears had been calibrated for exactly that sound since she was 12 years old. She heard it, and in the fraction of a second it took to register, something that had been carefully warming in her chest closed back down. She stood up. Her bag was on her shoulder before she had consciously decided to reach for it. "I'm sorry," she said, and her voice was flat now in the way voices go flat when someone is using everything they have to remain upright in public. "I'm sorry, I can't do this. This was a mistake. Please tell Raymond that I showed up and I tried." A different man might have grabbed her arm. A different man might have stood up fast. James did neither. He stayed exactly where he was. He kept his hands flat on the table. And in a voice that was not loud but somehow moved through the small room without effort, "You can go," he said. "I won't stop you. But I'd like you to leave because you want to leave, not because of what you think I'm thinking right now." She froze, bag on her shoulder, one foot already turned toward the door. She tried to take a step. She couldn't. Something in her chest, something that had been pulled tight for a very long time, gave way in the particular way that things give way when they have been held too long. She did not collapse exactly. She just stopped being able to hold herself in the shape she had spent 2 decades holding herself in. Her face did what faces do when crying finds you in public without your permission. The mouth went first, the eyes followed. Her shoulders came up toward her ears as if they could cover what was happening. They couldn't. She sat back down. She had not decided to. Her body decided. She put both hands over her face. "I am so tired," she said into her palms. Her voice came out muffled and younger than she meant it to sound. "I am so tired of walking into rooms and doing the math ahead of time. Calculating what everyone is going to conclude about me before they've spoken to me, and then hurting myself first so it stings less when they do it. I'm so tired of making jokes at my own expense before anyone else gets the timing." I'm 31 years old and I cannot remember what it feels like to walk through a door without bracing for it. I don't remember when that started. I just know it never stops. Ruth set her towel on the counter and pressed both hands flat on the bar. She did not move toward them. She did not move away. She just stood there, looking at the rain on the window, giving them the closest thing to privacy the room could offer. At the far end of the counter, on a stool by the door, an older man in a brown canvas jacket named Walter Greer, who came in most evenings for a single decaf, and whatever pie Ruth had left from the afternoon, looked down into his cup. He did not look away because he was uncomfortable. He looked away because he understood. He had buried his wife 9 months ago. He recognized the sound a person makes when they finally stop carrying something alone. Derek, who you might have assumed was already gone, was not. He had stopped just inside the door to button his coat. He had heard most of what Louise said. His hand had stopped moving on his second button. He stood there for a moment with his coat half open and looked at the floor and did not say anything and did not move. Marcus, beside him, had also stopped. He was looking at the back of Derek's head with an expression that was not judgment exactly. Something older than judgment. The kind of look a person gives when they realize the joke they laughed along with earlier tonight was not a joke. I want to ask you something, and I want you to sit with it for a moment rather than answering it fast. The first voice that ever taught you to be ashamed of how you look, the first sentence that made you understand your body, was a problem to be managed. Do you remember whose it was? Most of us do, if we're honest. A parent, a coach, a cousin at a summer cookout who said something they forgot before dessert and you carried home and kept. We kept it so long that at some point it stopped sounding like their voice. It started sounding like ours. Louise was 31 years old in that coffee shop. But the person crying into her hands was a much younger girl, somewhere around 12, sitting with a sentence she should never have had to receive. If there is a voice in your head right now, the one that recites your failings before you have finished your first cup of coffee in the morning, I just want to ask you tonight, is that voice actually yours? Or is it something you have been wearing for so long you confused it for your own skin? Louise was crying quietly now. The worst of it had passed. The kind of quiet that comes after, when the body has finally released what it was protecting. James did not reach across the table. He had learned in 3 years with Angela that some kinds of grief should not be interrupted. He said one thing, very low, "Take your time," and he meant it. He had nowhere else to be. Louise took her hands down. Her mascara had decided this was not its evening. She looked at him through wet eyelashes and her voice came out rough, with a small broken sound at the edge of it. "I'm sorry. I genuinely never do this." "You can do this." "No, I mean I don't. Not ever. Not in front of people I know, let alone someone I just met. Maybe it was time for it." She laughed, half a laugh, pressed the back of her hand against her eyes. "I bet you are deeply, deeply regretting saying yes to Raymond." "No," he said, "I'm not. There are tears that mean weakness, and there are the other kind. The kind that come out when, after a very long time of bracing, a person finally encounters someone who does not step aside to let the impact land. That second kind is not weakness. It is a thaw. It is the first warm day after a long winter and the ice has to go somewhere. If you have been frozen for long enough, friend, the day you finally cry in front of someone who does not flinch will feel like falling apart. It is not. It is the opposite. It is the moment you finally stop having to carry yourself alone. Maybe there is no one in your life right now in front of whom you could let yourself break open. Maybe you have been the strong one for so long that no one would know how to receive it from you. If that is true tonight, I want to say something to you directly. Until that person arrives, can you begin to be that person for yourself? Can you set the weight down, just for a little while, not forever, just long enough to remember what your shoulders feel like without it? Louise took a long breath, the kind that goes all the way to the bottom, the kind she had not taken in a room with another person in a very long time. She looked at the man across from her, this stranger who was no longer exactly a stranger, and she did not know what happened next. But she had not left. And for the first time in years, that itself felt like something worth noting. She wiped her face with the heel of her hand. She tried to find the easy, deflecting thing to say and could not locate it. "Okay," she said. Now I'm definitely the most memorable blind date Raymond has ever arranged. A crying woman in a coffee shop. He's going to be insufferable about this. James didn't move. You're not what I didn't ask for. She shook her head. She was not ready to hold that yet. She looked down at her cooling coffee, and when she spoke again, her voice was steadier. The kind of steadiness that comes just before a person says the truest and most difficult thing. You should know something, she said. This right here, this is why I don't do this. I am not a beautiful kind of complicated. I am not the version of difficult that anyone wants to sign up for. I am heavy in every sense of the word. I take up too much space and I know it and I cannot seem to stop. The room was quiet. Derek had not moved from near the door. His coat was still half open. He was looking at his own hands now. Marcus had turned to face the room. He was not looking at Derek. He was not looking at anyone. He was just standing in the middle of it, very still, as if the air had thickened, and he was not yet sure which direction to walk. Ruth, behind the counter, had set her towel down entirely. She was not pretending to work anymore. She was just standing there with both hands on the counter. Walter Greer at the far stool folded his glasses and set them carefully on the napkin in front of him. He put both hands flat on either side of his coffee cup, the way a man does when he is steadying himself for something. James looked at Louise for a long time. The kind of look that does not contain pity, something steadier, something that does not have an easy word. My daughter, he said. Her name is Nadia. She's 9 years old. 3 weeks ago, she came home from school on a Thursday. She dropped her backpack on the floor, and she came and stood in the kitchen doorway, and she asked me something that I have been thinking about every single day since. Louise looked up at him. She asked me, he said, Dad, am I ugly? Somewhere in the room a small breath was drawn in. It might have been Ruth. It might have been Marcus. James did not look around. He kept his eyes on Louise. And I did not answer her right away, because I realized, sitting there in the kitchen, that if I said the thing fathers are supposed to say, if I said, of course not, you're beautiful, I would be teaching her something I did not want to teach her. I would be telling her that her worth was sitting on the other side of that answer, that she needed to be confirmed beautiful in order to be confirmed worthy. And I thought about everything that would happen to her later. Every voice she would eventually encounter that would tell her something different. And I thought about the whole world I was building for her, and I did not want to build it on a mirror. He was not performing. He was not raising his voice. He was talking the way a man talks when he has been carrying something alone for weeks and has finally found a room where it might be safe to set it down. So I didn't say anything that night, he said. I kissed her good night, and I went and sat on the back step, and I tried to figure out what a father can give his daughter that no one else can take out of her. On the third night I went into her room. I sat on the edge of her bed, and I told her this. He paused. I said, Nadia, I don't know what other people will see when they look at you. I can't promise you what they'll decide. But I can tell you what I see. When you laugh, I forget I was tired. When you read to me out loud, I forget I was worried about anything. When you hold my hand in a parking lot, I forget that your mother isn't here anymore. People are going to look at you, baby, and some of them will not see anything that matters. But that is a problem with their eyes, not with you. The whole room was holding something in. James looked at Louise, and his eyes were bright, and he did not try to hide it. A little while ago, he said, you told me I could leave, and then you told me you take up too much space. He did not look away from her. I'm not going anywhere. Because if I stand up and walk out of this room tonight, then tomorrow morning when my daughter stands in front of her mirror and feels whatever she feels, I will not have anything true to tell her. The only way I keep saying what I said to her is if I mean it everywhere, not just at home, everywhere. So I need you to hear this. You are not too much. You are a person sitting across from another person. That is the whole of it. That is all either of us has ever been. The silence after he stopped lasted a few seconds. It felt much longer. Ruth turned her face to the side and pressed her wrist briefly to her eyes. The coffee machine behind her was hissing at something, and she did not seem to hear it. Marcus, near the door, had both hands in his jacket pockets and was looking at the floor with red eyes. Derek was standing beside him. He was not looking anywhere with the confidence he had brought in. Walter Greer stood up from his bar stool. He moved slowly, The way a man moves when his knees have been, through decades, they were not promised. He walked across the old wood floor of the Clover House, past the poetry shelves, past the empty tables, and he stopped beside Louise's chair. She looked up at him. He laid one weathered hand on her shoulder. His hand was so light it was almost not there. "Young lady," he said. His voice was low and sandy. "I lost my wife 9 months ago. She weighed 240 pounds the day she died, and I never kissed anyone more beautiful in my life. Not one time in 47 years. He patted her shoulder, once. Then he walked back to the counter without waiting for anything. He sat down, he picked up his glasses, he put them back on. He looked at his coffee. Louise's hand had come up to her mouth. She looked at James, he looked at her. She tried twice to speak. The first time, nothing. The second time, very small. "I don't know how to respond to any of that." "You don't have to," he said. "You just have to sit here." So she did. They sat for nearly half an hour after that. They did not say much, and what they did say was ordinary, quiet, the kind of conversation that does not perform. Ruth came over at some point without a word and set down 2 slices of apple cake with a thin drizzle of caramel going cold at the edges. When Louise opened her mouth to decline by reflex, Ruth shook her head once firmly. "Not tonight, honey. Tonight you take the cake." Louise picked up her fork. She ate. Derek and Marcus had left at some point during all of this. No one had noticed exactly when. The rain outside had stopped sometime during James's story. Neither of them had heard it stop. Now I want to tell you what happened to Derek after he left, because this is the part most people assume happens quietly and invisibly, the way small cruelties usually do. But it didn't. Marcus stopped Derek on the sidewalk outside the Clover House in the cold Portland air and said something that Derek would later describe as the worst 40 seconds of his recent life. Marcus did not yell. He did not threaten. He simply told Derek, in very plain language, what he had looked like tonight, what the sound he made had sounded like, and who it reminded him of, specifically, when they were 14 years old and someone in a school hallway made exactly that same sound at Marcus's older sister, who was as heavy and who had spent 3 years not eating lunch in the cafeteria because of how that hallway sounded. Derek stood in the rain and said nothing. Marcus said, "I let it go the first time because I didn't have the words fast enough. I'm not letting it go now." He walked to his car. He drove away. Derek stood on the sidewalk in front of the Clover House for a long time. Long enough for the window of the shop to show him his own reflection. He looked at it. He did not look at it the way people look at mirrors when they are grooming. He looked at it the way people look at mirrors when they have been shown something about themselves they cannot unsee. He did not go back inside. It was too late, and the night had already done what it had done, and an apology walked into a room, after the fact, is a different thing from the choice made inside the moment. He knew that. He was not stupid. He was just a man who had made a very clear mistake and was standing in the rain understanding it for the first time with his whole body. He would tell his girlfriend about it that night. He would tell it badly at first, with too much self-justification, and she would let him finish, and then ask him one question he could not answer well. He would sleep badly. He would not entirely forget it, and that is probably the most honest thing that can be said about the particular kind of reckoning that awaits people who are not evil, only careless with their cruelty. They do not transform, they accumulate. When James and Louise finally stood up to leave, it was nearly 10 o'clock. Ruth would not accept payment from either of them. She simply pointed at the door with her folded towel. Her face had made its decision, and it was not negotiable. Outside, the sidewalk was clean and cold, the air sharp in the way Portland air gets after rain when the clouds finally pull apart. The streetlights were doubled in the wet pavement. James walked Louise to the corner. He did not try to kiss her. He did not ask for her number in a way that required an answer. He stood at the corner and said, "Next Saturday, same place. I'll be at that table from 7 to 9. You come if you want to come. You don't have to." She nodded. She did not trust her voice yet. He gave her a small, real smile and walked toward the bus stop in the other direction. Louise walked toward her own car. She walked slowly. The street was nearly empty, the way Portland streets go empty on a Saturday after the rain passes, when everything feels recently washed and very still. Halfway down the block, she passed a closed flower shop. The lights were off inside, but the street lamp behind her made the front glass into a low, dark mirror. She had a routine for this. Every reflective surface she had ever passed, she had a system. Angle the shoulders a certain way. Pull the coat in. Find the expression that does not invite assessment. Defeat the mirror before the mirror could defeat her. She did none of it. She stopped. She looked. She looked at the woman in the dark glass, coat damp at the shoulders, eyes still a little swollen, hair beginning to come loose from where she'd pinned it 2 hours and a lifetime ago. She did not look away. She lifted her hand slowly and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a small, unremarkable gesture. The kind of thing a person does 100 times a day without thinking. Except she could not remember the last time she had done it in a reflection without the thought arriving alongside it like an invoice. You look wider from that angle. The thought did not come. She tucked her hair. She looked at herself for one more moment. She started walking. The next streetlight was bright ahead of her. Behind her somewhere, a man was walking home to a sleeping 9-year-old who had asked him a question he had taken seriously enough to sit with for 3 days. Friend, I want to say one last thing to you before this story closes. In your life, you may not get a James. I will not lie to you about that. There are people who wait a very long time for the person who will sit across from them and refuse to look away. Some of them wait their entire lives. That is real, and it is not a small thing to say it. But here is what is also true. You do not have to wait for a James to begin becoming one for yourself. You can be the first person who does not step aside when you enter the room. You can be the one who, after all of this time, finally stops handing yourself the exit. You can be the person who stands in the dark glass of an ordinary shop window on an ordinary wet street and simply, without performance, without the old choreography, tucks your hair behind your ear and keeps walking. And if you find yourself sitting across from someone who is breaking, for any reason at all, for their body, their grief, their private sense of not being enough, I want to ask you one thing. Don't get up. Don't give them the sound. Stay in the room. Because one person who stayed is sometimes the whole reason someone else decides they are allowed to stay too. If this story stayed with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever witnessed someone being underestimated, only to discover who they really were? Share your story below. And if you want more stories like this, stories about ordinary people with extraordinary hidden depths, hit that subscribe button. I'll see you in the next one.